Khan Yunis, in the south of Gaza, has been under Israeli attack for weeks, forcing the mass displacement of civilians south to Rafah. The Nasser hospital, the largest in the region, remains under sniper fire. There are 450 patients, 300 medical staff, and 10,000 displaced Palestinians trapped inside with little food and water. This 14-year-old girl was shot and killed outside the hospital when she went looking for water. Other Palestinians sheltering inside the compound then risked their lives retrieving her body under sniper fire. Those trapped inside are now using a cart on rope to transport water into the compound to avoid the sniper fire. And horrifically, you can still see the bloodstain from the girl who was shot on the road. The Al Amal hospital, also in Khan Yunis, has been under siege and attack too. Palestinians sheltering inside have now begun to flee the compound, with Palestinian Red Crescent workers forced to evacuate patients in their hospital beds. Those who can will head south to Rafah, a town on the Egyptian border now housing around half of Gaza's 2.3 million residents. Before the war, it was home to less than 300,000 people, but the route to Rafah is difficult. And in the last few days, more than 100,000 people have passed through what the IDF has called a, quote, safe corridor running west from Khan Yunis to the coast. Now details have emerged of the harassment and abuse they've experienced at the hands of the IDF while using that corridor, including being forced to chant anti-Hamas slogans. Israeli magazine 972 spoke to several Palestinians who've made the journey. Ibtissam Mahdi is a Gazan journalist who fled Khan Yunis with her husband and children, and this is what happened to her. The army separated men from women and instructed us to kneel. Then an officer began to lecture us, blaming Hamas for our displacement, the destruction of our homes, our need to seek refuge, and the fear we are experiencing. He then told us that in order to be allowed to pass through the checkpoint unharmed, we had to chant slogans against the resistance. The people want the overthrow of Hamas, and God is sufficient for us, and he is the best disposer of affairs against Hamas and the Qassam brigades, appropriating a line from the Quran. The officer insisted on the repetition of these slogans. Only after more than 45 minutes did the soldiers permit women and children to pass, while men were kept behind. Ibtsam's husband was detained for 7 hours, and her account matches that of Mohammed Jaklab, a 56-year-old mother of 2 sons, Mohammed and Ibrahim. As the three crossed the checkpoint, her sons were separated from her by IDF soldiers. Hours later, Ibrahim was released, with 972 reporting this. Ibrahim was shivering when he arrived. The army had forced him to strip naked, including his underwear, despite the cold and rainy weather. He was then ordered to step into a pool of water, jump up and down multiple times, then get out and stand for 10 minutes before being allowed to put on his clothes and cross the checkpoint. We were humiliated extensively after the soldiers scanned our eyes with a biometric camera. The treatment we faced surpassed degradation. Our dignity was violated for over 6 hours as we sat on our knees, forbidden from sitting comfortably. That was testimony from Ibrahim. 25-year-old Khalid Zakut also fled Khan Yunis for Rafah with his wife and young son. 972 magazine explain here. After entering the corridor to leave Khan Yunis, Zakut was first forced to abandon his backpack, which contained his work laptop, mobile phone, and clothes. When I tried to talk to them about the bag, they insulted me and my mother, he recounted. They ordered me to leave without further complaints. Zakut's wife and son were allowed to pass through the checkpoint, but he was held there with a large number of men. Eventually, he was let through, but his family had disappeared into the crowds. He said this. Since my exit, I've been searching for my wife and son. Forced to leave my mobile phone behind, I lost the means to communicate with them, and my wife does not know how to navigate the situation without me. These accounts aren't the first we've heard of Palestinians being abused by IDF soldiers, and since IDF soldiers cannot seem to stop filming themselves, there's also video. This footage was found on a far-right Israeli Telegram channel by Middle East Eye. Around 20 Palestinian men who were detained in Gaza are blindfolded and handcuffed on a bus. An IDF soldier forces them to praise an Israeli family, the Azules, possibly his own. He forces them to chant the words, quote, "We, the terrorists from Gaza, are very afraid of the entire Azule family. The Azule family is very, very, very respectable, important, and we want to be the slaves of the Azule family forever and ever." It's almost a caricature of the abuse of power. Palestinians in Gaza are enduring abuse by the IDF because they want to reach safety in Rafah. But of course, there is no safe place in Gaza, not even at its southernmost end. Airstrikes on the city have intensified. And on Wednesday night, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed that he has ordered the IDF to begin operations in Rafah, leaving Palestinians sheltering there with nowhere else to go. Kieran, what does this continued and documented abuse say about the most moral army in the world?
Well, it says it could continue to act with impunity. But I think most importantly, what it says is that a systematic process of dehumanization has moved so far, has taken hold so extensively, that I struggle, though, I hope that I'm wrong. I struggle to see a way back on that front. It's Israelis, including in the army, in the end are human beings. They're human beings. And so in order to preside over such unimaginable cruelty, a very successful process of dehumanization of the other must have taken place. And it doesn't take place in 4 months. It takes place over many, many, many decades. And we know that this is obviously inalienable from the project of settler colonialism, and now bringing it to what seems to be, it's attempted telos genocide. I thought about watching some of those, some of that footage and reading some of that. I thought about Hannah Arendt, not somebody I particularly admire, wrote about the banality of evil. None of this seems banal to me. None of it seems banal. I have to say, it doesn't seem like cogs in a machine. It, as you said, almost seems, you said, like a caricature of I believe, cruelty or oppression, and that seems to capture it more accurately than anything like the banality of evil or some sort of consequence of I don't know what. But rather than Arendt, I've been thinking about James Baldwin and about what James Baldwin said about his own experience as an African American during the civil rights struggles in the 1960s and 70s. And it's a good way of centering Palestinians in this again, rather than thinking about the systematic process of dehumanization and the cruelty of the IDF and the Israeli state. What he said was, it probably comes as a terrible shock to the colonial mindset that I want what you want. All I want is to be left alone. I don't want you to help me. I don't want anything else. I just want to be left alone. And what's tragic is, what's heartbreaking is that every single one of those Palestinians that we've featured in all of these stories around Khan Yunis and beyond, all they want is for nothing more extravagant or outlandish than to be left alone.